Welcome to my painting process for 2023. In this drawing, I'm going to be working on Venom riding a bike. It's kind of a meme drawing, but it is inspired from the new Spider-Man game because this is a bug that can actually happen, which I thought was hilarious. So I knew that I had to draw it, and it's a little bit outside of my regular subject matter because it's not a thick anime painting, but it still shows all the steps and process I usually take. So here you see I'm actually just working on the sketch. I'm trying to stay as zoomed out as I can for most of this just because I don't want to get too hung up on all of the details. So I know that sometimes it's a little bit harder to draw on a canvas when it's really tiny, but it is something that kind of just helps me because if I can see the big picture, I make big picture decisions. And if I zoom in, I'm focusing on stuff that really doesn't matter. So I usually will try to stay as zoomed out as I can, and I usually make my sketch pretty detailed. I know that some people will kind of skip out on the sketching or the, the this part of the painting process because they can improvise and fill in the gaps when they paint. I cannot. So my sketches are usually very detailed. I kind of do actually figure everything out. So you'll see that I sketched out the character. I put in where the little Venom logo is going to be, and I drew in everything for the bike. Now I'm just kind of masking everything into separate layers just for things that I know are going to be a pain to overlap. I usually try to paint in as few layers as possible, or if I do use a lot of layers, I merge them down just so I'm not spending as much time toggling in between layers and I'm actually spending more time painting. So I have a thing for the character, I have a thing for the bike and the tires, and then you see I'm having like a basic layout for the background here. So I will be using a lot of photo bashing, and I'll explain more on that here in a bit when I get to it. But I'm still kind of adding in a basic background. I've got a vanishing point. I've got kind of an idea of how the lighting is going to go, and I will usually kind of do a really rough version on my own first before I start pulling in textures because I figure if you have the colors and then you throw in the textures, it kind of just solidifies what you already have. I know that some people will usually use one or two photo textures, but I will actually use a lot. And I will usually just use different kinds of blending modes to tweak and adjust things, because you can paint over a texture, but it will actually lose the photo texture if you do that. But if you use different kinds of blending modes, it actually makes it keep all the detail it has. So, you can use color balancing and adjusting and overlays and multiplies and whatever, and you can keep all of those details, and you can actually, change the tone and the color on them like you see me doing for those buildings. And I don't know, it's kind of like a fun jigsaw puzzle. You kind of see how much you can rip and tear everything apart and move it and tweak it. So, even though you're using a bunch of different photos, it still kind of feels like your own thing at the end. But I usually like still sketching out the background or having an idea of what I'm doing before I use a photo texture, just so it fits the composition of a drawing. So it's still technically my thing, but all the photos and textures and stuff will help save you time. So I don't always do this. I usually will do it for things that I'm just not willing to spend as much time on. I know I could draw it if I really, really wanted to, but sometimes you kind of just gotta pick and choose your battles and decide if it's worth your sanity. But for a drawing that's literally meant to be a meme, nah, I'm good. But you see, I just rip out little chunks of buildings. I copy and paste. I free transform and I warp. It's pretty much like everything that I have. You can't look at a building as a building or something as something else. I literally just will see the pixels and try to kind of mix, match, and mesh stuff together as well as I can, adding in some more memes here in the back wall. I don't think anyone will see it, but that's for me. Once I have the background all laid out, I'll usually merge it down and I'll go in with some brightness and contrast filters over it. So I give it like more of a definitive light source. I go in with overlay and soft light and color dodge just to change the tone of the lighting. So if you look at it from a couple of seconds ago, it's more grayscale, but now it has like more blues and hues and shadows and stuff in it. Adding some motion lines for our boy, and I'm using the Gaussian and motion blurs just to make it seem like our boy's really coming at you, uh but yeah, that's just more for like an effective movement, not a thing I necessarily always do, but I thought it was fun for this one. Now I'm actually getting into the actual character part of the drawing, literally halfway into this process. But I usually like finishing the background first or getting at least close to done because that'll at least give me an informed color palette because the surrounding environment is going to actually affect the color palette of the character. You know, if you have somebody who's in a solid red environment, you're going to see that they have a lot more bounce light of red or something like that. And since it's nighttime and it's a blue scene, I know that I am going to be using a lot of that color picking for the blue, like literally off of the street and stuff to put into Venom's color palette later. So I will either get the background entirely done or as close to done as I can get it. Now you'll see here I'm actually making like a selection with the lasso tool and kind of going in with like a normal cell shading pass first, just to help me figure out the lighting. I figure if I do this all at once, it's going to help it at least be consistent, you know? I won't work on one arm with one light source and one arm with another light source, and it's entirely different from one to the other. But the best part of doing this is now that I've made a bunch of in-between colors, I can literally color pick and I'll just be able to mix and match stuff. So this is actually the first pass. This is just where I want to get the light source at least consistent. But, you know, Venom is a gross, slimy, goopy lad that probably smells like tires and Vicks Vapor Rub. But I'm here just trying to set up the light source and make sure that at least that's consistent. I want the light coming in from the left. It's like the upper left. But here you see I'm just getting in the muscle definition. A lot of watching Dragon Ball will teach you how to draw muscles, at least to a stylized extent. Not 100% real, but real enough. You know, it's passable that you know that our boy is yoked and he could definitely pedal a bike at like a lot of miles per hour. But here, working on the hands and the details, like I said, I'm just trying to stay as zoomed out as I can because I am really notoriously bad at zooming way into a drawing. I have a really big drawing tablet. I got a Cintiq Pro 24, so it's a big ass tablet and I can zoom in with it and see all of the pixels. So sometimes you're tempted to want to do that, but I am trying to be better at not doing that because I think it's better that I make big picture decisions because the drawing will come together a lot better if I make big picture decisions instead of small picture decisions. Because I'm sure if you were to zoom into this drawing, you would see it's actually really rough and really messy. For all three people who would care about that, they'd be like, damn, that boy's brushwork needs work. But for literally everybody else who's just going to be glancing at this for 2 seconds on their phone and going, blocked, it's good enough for them. So that's kind of what I'm doing. You kind of got to prioritize and say, even though I can make everything pixel perfect, I'm really not going to. I'm just going to make sure that there's implied lighting, you know, like make sure that everything looks like it's supposed to from a distance. But yeah, with the actual rendering and the details in his eyes, I kind of just worked from big to small. Now I'm actually getting into the small, which is why I worked on his head last, just because, you know, the likeness, I'm going to be zooming in and working on him for a little bit. Not way zoomed in, but, you know, enough. And now that I have the actual generalized lighting, which is what I would call the first pass, you know, you make sure that the lighting is consistent, you make sure that you have good tones and stuff in. That's when I start zooming in and actually working on all of the details, you know, adding in the shine, adding in that little bit of extra contrast, the veins, like all the details. It's just, I find it easier to get literally 90% of this done first, and then I'll go back in later and say, yeah, now I want to make the details instead of trying to do it all at once with the risk that I'm probably going to paint over it. So it's just a workflow that I feel like is a little bit smaller. So, you know, I go big picture first pass and then details on the second pass. And then from there, it's just make it as refined as you want it to be. So whether you're drawing Venom or you're drawing some kind of cutesy anime drawing or whatever, I still think it's good to have like the foundation of the drawing down because it leaves you with less guesswork for later. But you see here, I'm like really starting to lean into the details and I'm adding in some bounce and reflected lighting, making him blue, adding in some color corrections and stuff like that. And then I'm finally getting into the little Venom logo, which was on a separate layer. And of course, I'm just trying to capture the light source, trying to make it look convincing and goopy and slimy and whatnot. But yeah, other than that, it's just polished details and blending modes, you know, just those last little things to make the drawing look pretty. I know I went through a lot of info really fast. 10 minutes is probably a long video for you to watch, but this whole thing took like 3 hours, so explaining it in real time is kind of tough. But if you learned something, let me know. And if there's anything else you'd like me to discuss, just let me know. And this is the final drawing. I hope you like it. I hope you learned something. And yeah, I'll see you for the next one of these next year, and I'll explain how things have changed. Bye.